There's data that you capture, but the intelligence is finding what you do with this information and how do you ultimately bring about a smart city. So what's exciting now is the fact that you're able to get all this trifecta coming in, where you've got data, you've got processing power, you've got speed, you've got computing power. I mean, nowadays, one would say traditional computing is a thing of the past. You're seeing the future of smart cities going beyond just what we know today. A smart city tomorrow is a city that is connected, but also that is dynamically communicating, interacting, and engaging with the people living in the city.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another conversation under EVIS and Eco Mobility Global, or EMG, podcast series. I am Joseph Alcantara, Head of Marketing for EVIS and EMG, and it is our pleasure to welcome one very special guest who would be sharing with us a lot of insights and inputs about the very important industry and category that's important for our world right now. If you're new to our platform, EVIS is the Middle East leading summit for electric mobility, energy systems, and innovation, while EMG is our newest global platform sharing people first, sustainable, multimodal transport across land, sea, and air. Both events come together in October 2026 in Abu Dhabi, UAE. And through this podcast, we'll bring you closer to the voices shaping the future of mobility. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by someone who's been influencing the mobility landscape long before many of these conversations actually become mainstream. Our guest is Stephen Shafiq Nasser, CEO of Altair Advisory LLC. He brings more than 15 years of leadership across smart cities, intelligent transport systems, renewable energy, and mobility innovation. He has spent over a decade working closely with International Road Federation, advising executive boards and chairing committees focused on AI, cybersecurity, automated vehicles, and next generation infrastructure, especially across the Middle East. As IRF MENA Committee Chairman and Chairman of the ITS Committee for IRF Global, Stephen has been central to strategic road mapping discussions that directly shape how cities prepare the future of mobility. He sits at the crossroad of mobility, energy, and intelligent systems. And if you want to understand the real future of cities, this conversation is essential. Stephen, welcome. It is our honor to have you with us today.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you. It's an honor to be here and to be working with EVIS on their future roadmap.
Awesome. So I'll dive right in. First question, Stephen. You've spent more than 15 years focused and immersed in smart cities and mobility innovation. So to begin, what shifts in the industry are most exciting for you right now?
I think the most exciting shift that we're seeing in industry, if we were to take artificial intelligence, not the buzzword, but basically the value that it's creating, the fact that we have, first of all this data. So you talked about ITS. So ITS, Intelligent Transport Systems, it builds its entire foundation or system around sensors and data capturing devices, be it cameras or any type of sensors you put on the road. And now that's allowed us to capture a lot of data. And now we are in an era where we have computing power, processing power, speed, and we're able to take so much of this, all this valuable information, and make sense of it. So in the past, when we used to talk about smart cities, or we used to talk about that down the road we're going to have connected cars or even autonomous vehicles, these were all changes or paradigms that were slowly taking shape, but they were more on a conceptual level, right? We were saying, okay, we want to make a city smart. So how do we make a city smart? We put a bunch of cameras, a bunch of data capturing devices, and we're able to capture some information. But intelligence is what you do with that information. Okay, that's intelligence. There's data that you capture, but the intelligence is finding what you do with this information and how do you ultimately bring about a smart city. So what's exciting now is the fact that you're able to get all this trifecta coming in where you've got data, you've got processing power, you got speed, you got computing power. I mean, nowadays, one would say traditional computing is a thing of the past. The future is quantum computing. And then you start talking about, multi-algorithmic, processing layers that are beyond what we see today. So all this is making it, you're seeing the future of smart cities going beyond just what we know today of smart city. A smart city today is a city that is connected, but a smart city tomorrow is a city that is connected, but also that is dynamically communicating, interacting, and engaging with its inhabitants, with the people living in the city. You see an autonomous car today, and we're slowly, going through the stages of testing and certification. And in doing that, we're trying to get to the level where a car drives it by itself, right? But this is happening much faster than anyone realizes. Everyone is saying, oh, it's going to take a long time because the algorithmic programming and computing is becoming all the more advanced and capable. And we're slowly beginning to merge into this level of accuracy and efficacy when we're dealing with AI. That's happening also very quickly. Then you're slowly you're going to see autonomous vehicles, autonomous platforms of all sorts. We're not just talking about the cars on the road. We're talking about our future cars, our future air taxis, probably our future ferries and ships, our future logistics platform, how we deliver and receive material, in that last mile. So everything is going to get disrupted. And that is why in the next 5 to 10 years, we are going to see some serious transformations happening that are beyond just, what we see where you go, okay, we went from computing to the internet bubble. To the internet and the internet to the sort of cyber physical industry 4.0. But now AI is the next big thing. But it's also important. This is a word of caution. It's also important as we're seeing all this happening, that we don't lose focus of, at the end of the day, we do want to deliver lasting value. We do want to ensure the safety and security of people. And at the same time, we realize that this could be a power that, if incorrectly harnessed or taken advantage of, can wield, can be destructive as much as it is productive. So we need to be responsible. We are our own enemies sometimes, and we need to be responsible, and we need to find a way to take all these shifts and make them happen in such a way that we're not eliminating the essence of life in the process.
That is such an insightful and inspiring and exciting unpacking of the future ahead, Stephen, that's really happening right now. I think you're so right when it comes to saying that with everything that we see that's unfolding in front of our eyes right now, that used to be very conceptual, which is now turning into reality in such a fast velocity and speed. This is really something that we as laymen are very much excited to see and very much in preparation for what's ahead. And I think experts like you, who has that authority, that knowledge, that expertise and influence to shape what the future would look like to bring this to life, is very key and very important. The thing that I would want to start unpacking based on what you've mentioned is that, yes, we have all these developments happening today at a very fast velocity, and specifically for the Middle East, where it's also scaling fast and it's very ambitious, and the projects are massive. However, it can't be just done in a snap of a finger. For sure, there are challenges along the way that all the shareholders or stakeholders are also experiencing. Touching upon road mapping first, let's just look at that sector. What are the most immediate or important road challenges or road mapping challenges that you're seeing that should be focused on to really prepare the entire infrastructure to make the future that you're looking at really come to life?
That's a really good question. In fact, you mentioned on the chairman of the IRF MENA committee. As you mentioned, the IRF, the International Road Federation, has been around for a long time. It's actually been around since the 1940s. It's a not-for-profit organization that brings together private, public education sector. And with it is bringing about the disciplines, the frameworks, the mindsets, the benchmarks that can support a solid and strong roads, highways, infrastructure development program. When we set out and we created the MENA committee, of which I'm a chairman of, we realized that, and it's a lot of my experience, as you mentioned, I work with a lot of different technology companies, government agencies, and users, clients. You realize that while we can be all ambitious, okay, and we all have great ideas, and we're all very inspiring of one another, we it's so important that you have alignment and communication amongst the stakeholders, okay, because any project, especially when it's of a certain magnitude, it's going to involve a lot of different players. And given the open market here, where you're dealing with technology from anywhere, they're very excited and very open and inviting to any sort of technology innovation from anywhere to try it and to be a test bed and a benchmark for it. Except what happens is you have expectations when you don't have alignment and communication across the stakeholders, then you have expectations that are also not aligned. And when you have expectations that are not aligned or communication that's disrupted, you start to have some delays and challenges on actually moving towards the execution and delivery of a solution or a project. And then you find that a lot of the time is spent in trying to clearing the chaos than actually moving forward to getting an end result. That's one. The other thing is it's so important, and given my experience here and working very closely with the different agencies and their respectable and distinguished officers, is that it's so important for everyone to realize that the UAE or this, I've worked a lot with, of course, the UAE, is that it's a very unique environment. It's a is a very unique ecosystem. So while you have a lot of ambition and drive towards innovation, towards cutting edge technologies and solutions, you need to also realize that you need to take into account that the setup is also very unique. And so these solutions need to not just say, well, you know what, we've tested it, let's say in Silicon Valley, or we've tested it in Europe, in Italy, or in France. So we can bring it here and it works. They like that the solution is thought of more as a unique, localized, customized solution for the UAE than just another take it out of one country, put it here, and it works, because they know it's not going to work. They've in a long time ago when the UAE, when things were just still getting developed and getting set up, yeah, there was a bit of a learning curve. There was a bit of a sharing of information and knowledge that would close the gap and get everybody on the same page. But nowadays, a lot of they come from the top education and schools, and they've traveled a lot and they've been to a lot of places. So they know what they're talking about. They know what they're looking for. Okay. So it's very important that when you're addressing the challenges or trying to position a solution for this region, that you really do take into account the uniqueness of the region and take into account the factors that make it very unique, and also speak about the solution in terms of how this is a solution for the UAE, how it addresses the challenges, and how it ultimately delivers the value that they're looking for. And that's what we set up to do with the MENA committee. The MENA committee, when I was building it up and becoming a chairman of, the whole idea was, again, we said a committee for the people, by the people. Okay. So what we wanted was to bring about this intelligence, this knowledge, this brainstorming across the tables so that we can have some really valuable and lasting discussions. And that is also what Altair Advisory is about. So when I set up is realizing that there is this gap of knowledge, or like this disconnect that happens when you're dealing with ambitious, innovative technologies, demanding certain expectation end user and clients, and you got to be the bridge. You got to be that kind of
Mm.
that connection between the two endpoints in order to get some sort of executed lasting results.
That's great to hear. And it's also a noble mission. And I know that a lot of work has to be done there. But I think to your point, it's really connecting all the dots when it comes to the knowledge, the expertise, the customization for the region, for the market, because every city is unique, even if we're adapting the same kind of technology or innovation. It can't be a one size fits all kind of environment because there are various layers and different stakeholders or partners or arms or sectors that would have to take into account. So when you describe that challenge, I suddenly remember this thought about infrastructure readiness because the way you've described it is like preparing for that infrastructure readiness, especially within the context of laying the foundation, say, for example, for autonomous vehicles. So if we will be focusing on that, because infrastructure readiness mean different things to different stakeholders, right? So from your lens and from the lens of your role as committee chair and advisory lead or founder, working with regulators, operators, and tech providers, what does infrastructure readiness actually look like for autonomous vehicles?
Well, before I answer this question, Joseph, let me tell you. So it really is what you're getting. So because you have technology shifts happening so quickly, and you have a product developed today could be obsolete tomorrow because of so many things happening that affect that product innovation and shelf life. It is really the difference between selling a product and solving a problem. Okay.
Mm,
And here over the years, what they've seen is they create the test bed, products come here and starts, people start selling products and solutions, but they don't solve the problem. In the interim, maybe helped the deviate matters and create some sort of a solve one part of it, but a solution in my mind is something that lasts and solves the challenges. Okay, today if you look at autonomous vehicles, for the most part we are dealing with a test bed with a lot of different technologies and different vendors of autonomous vehicles. When you look at the infrastructure, so for the most part, so there need, of course, we are going to talk about the difference between a connected vehicle and an automated vehicle and autonomous vehicle. So when you look at autonomous vehicles, all the intelligence is supposed to be generated within the vehicle, so it's able to drive itself and figure out where it's going and what it's supposed to do. If you take two autonomous vehicles, that companies or vendors, you would say, that that hold a certain status quo. So you've got Waymo and then you've got Uber, right?
mhm,
So sorry, not Uber, Tesla. Our friend Elon Musk. So if
mhm,
you look at Waymo tends to work around with lidars and sensors and geofence, and they've kind of figured out a certain area of movement that makes the autonomous vehicle move in a very streamlined, very controlled manner. And if you look at Tesla, the guy doesn't use sensors. He's just taken all the video footage of the cameras built into the car to create some sort of advanced AI algorithmic intelligence that's allowing the car to figure out where to drive and what to do. So on here you have two autonomous vehicles. One is using sensors, one is using AI. If you want to look at, in that case, really a lot of the infrastructure is, with an autonomous vehicle, it's really the car itself. It's how the
mm,
car is going about analyzing, studying, and processing the roadmap that it needs to drive on, and how it's able to differentiate between, another car, pedestrians, and all that. Now, of course, if you were talking about connected automated vehicles, in this case, you have the connectivity that's happening vehicle to vehicle or vehicle to intersection, all that. In that case, what you essentially you're doing there, you're going to rely a lot on infrastructure because you need the units in the car, what are called the onboard units. You need the units on the road that are called the roadside units, and they're transmitting the information to the car to the road side unit, and there's this sort of communication happening where you're able to see and connect from car to pedestrian, car to infrastructure. And right now, for this, we're still in a lot of the, we're still in the first stage of it, right? We're still getting there to set up these kind of environments and to get some sort of, proof of concepts and test beds going to support connected cars or automated cars as opposed to autonomous vehicles. Autonomous vehicles, the real challenge that we have right now, and especially Abu Dhabi Mobility has been working on it, and it's been an impressive effort on their part, is getting to the level where you have the proper framework and compliance in place for testing, certification, and regulation. Okay. And a lot of that starts with registering the autonomous vehicle that's going to be going through the testing and trying to also include with it all the information or the technology that's going to be used as part of the testing and certification as autonomous vehicle. So it's really about creating these compartments of certification and testing and classification in order to get autonomous vehicles on the road, in order to get them to pass certain kind of regulation and compliance and have them slowly but surely enter the mainstream, and at the same time keep analyzing and monitoring the ability to get to that level where the autonomous vehicle is driving in fact by itself without a driver here in the UAE.
That is such a great and crystallized explanation, Stephen. Very helpful and also very clear when it comes to the road ahead, especially when it comes to addressing a problem, differentiating between the two types of vehicles, and you inserting the very buzz-worthy term right now. Everything is AI. Suddenly, the AI boom happened this year, not only within the context of this industry, but overall. It's like literally using it in the hands of regular Joe Schmo or people on the streets who are now understanding the concept, the execution, the application, and the adaptation of AI. Now, to flip it on the other side, because we have started this artificial intelligence topic within the context of the vehicles, right? On the other side, how will artificial intelligence and machine learning support safer roads, smoother traffic flow, and more intelligent urban mobility planning? Because it would have to go hand in hand when it comes to the execution and the launch and the usage of the vehicles, because the roads around us, know, the safety, as well as the traffic flow, I think is also very important. How will AI play a role to make sure that that is also covered?
Well, that's a really good question, especially that, AI itself keeps on learning and AI itself keeps on growing, right? So I remember if you want to look at an AI algorithm that was just, first time written, then it's as young and if you want to look at AI and machine learning as learning, it's as young and as infant as a fetus, right? As a baby, whatever they like to call it, right? Digital baby. And then along the way, it gets data, it learns, it grows and grows and grows. The idea today with AI is that we keep on training it, it keeps on getting smarter, it keeps on getting more advanced. Thing is, at the heart of any is the data, and that sometimes people do not realize that key factor how important it is data, right? So today, if you want to make safer roads or you want to look at a way to get traffic to move right or more streamlined or deal with a less congested traffic flow or road usage. At the end of the day, what you're essentially doing is you're taking video feeds, you're taking data and video
Mm.
feeds from certain intersections, from certain road networks and everything. You're analyzing them and you're doing combination of analysis around driver behavior, around traffic flow and traffic volume at certain times. And all this ultimately allows you to look at legacy or past performance, past behavior, and taking that and projecting it forward and saying, okay, how am I going to get, how do I predict people are going to drive around this intersection? Or how do I predict these traffic flows are going to move at these certain times? So what essentially the kind of AI we have today when it comes to traffic flow and road safety and road usage essentially is taking all these data feeds on the video, these video data feeds, and then analyzing them in order to predict, to come up with certain driver behavior, driver performance, traffic flow models in order for us to know in advance where do we expect congestions to happen, where do we expect traffic accidents to be more frequent, where do you expect and how can and based on that, how can we take the, from these traffic accidents, which ones are going to be fatal. So we start painting, let's say, the doomsday picture of what exactly is happening on the road and where is traffic getting affected, and from there it then ultimately trickles down to urban planning, road audits, and trying to figure out how you can re-engineer and redesign certain road networks or certain intersections so that they could be less congested, and they could be less fatal.
Wow. Hearing that, I do understand that it would take a bit of time for AI to learn everything that they're seeing because, it would entail a lot of data, a lot of connection of these data, and then forecasting and applying that, right? With the way that the technology when it comes to vehicle manufacturing is happening, how is the urban planning and road safety, especially when it comes to the government, the ministry, the stakeholders who are doing the build on that side? Do you see them catching up at the same speed and velocity as that of the technology of the manufacturers? Are they meeting halfway, or we still have a long way to go to make sure that both would connect so that both will harmoniously work together?
Well, I think there's a synchronization happening there, and also some catch up that needs to happen. So, if you look at traditionally today, road and highway infrastructure have been traditionally engineering structures, right? Streaming engineering structures of sorts that are built to support certain kinds of road signage, road design, road engineering. It's all there. And of course, these engineering companies work very closely with the urban planning and to work with the consultants and work with the municipality. What is shifting there is that as we start getting the next level, this next era of intelligent roads or smart cities or connected highways, you start realizing how much of the it's like you're going from the analog to the digital, right? It's essentially what's happening is the intelligence now and the communication is going directly into the vehicles. So vehicle to vehicle. So it's like at the end of the day, the vehicle itself has the intelligence and the smarts to figure out, where it's taking a right, where it's taking a left, where it's moving forward, at what speed. Like in other words, you have little, you start getting less and less interaction with the infrastructure. You know, so one would say that a city that has adopted autonomous cars or even connected cars may not need to have as much quote unquote wayfinding signage or as much infrastructure, traditional infrastructure that normally is designed and is deployed as part of the traditional road network or road engineering network, right? Because now essentially what's happening is you've got communication happening internally. So you've got a message that's coming directly into the dashboard of your car telling you take a right to go to this gas station or keep going straight to the nearest, and then so all this information is coming to you. So essentially your roadmap has become a digital virtual interface inside the car, as opposed to outside the car. So then the whole urban planning and design will change because now essentially what you're doing is you're not building quote unquote an analog city, you're building a digital city. And so, you don't need as much bulk happening on the road because essentially all you need is just somewhere to support some sort of transmitter or roadside, unit transmitter in order to be able to support the communication between vehicles. That's one. Second of all, is if you look at the future where they're moving towards adaptive traffic controllers and everything is turning into being more dynamic and connected, then essentially what you're saying is down the road, you're driving up and the red light and the green light and all that are on your dashboard. Like your dashboard itself in the car is telling you that the traffic signals ahead are red and it adds the countdown for it to be green. So there's so much more communication intelligence happening in the car that you have less and less, need to build this bulk infrastructure. So I imagine that there would need to be some adjusting happening with the urban planning and municipality.
Let's take this even a notch higher, Stephen, because not only are we covering land, but we're also looking at air and sea, which is really very interesting because I know that you've also been very vocal about mobility, taking that to the skies, right? So if you're going to paint us a picture, what does that future look like, especially for fast developing countries or regions in terms of embracing that, preparing for that, and being able to see the developments based off of that?
Well, clearly Abu Dhabi, under the Smart Autonomous Vehicle Initiative, SAVI, has taken on a very aggressive roadmap to bring autonomous vehicle and capability, sea, air, and land. I was actually, so for the longest time, I saw these as flying cars or air taxis. And I remember I was invited to speak at a helicopter show in Dubai on a section that RTA was going to speak, but then the helicopter people said the RTA couldn't make it. If you want, you can speak about eVTOLs. And it was my first time to do some research and dive into, eVTOLs and what it's about. eVTOL being electric vehicle takeoff and landing, which is air taxis. And, I put into Google and and I'm like, okay, air taxis, IRF, flying cars, it's all the same. So I remember putting in eVTOLs and trying to search. The first thing that comes up in front of me is the FAA, the website to the FAA, the Federal Aviation Authority. And then I got very curious. I'm like, Federal Aviation Authority? Okay, this is not FHWA, which is Federal Highway Authority. Now we're Federal Aviation Authority. And then I started diving deeper, and then I realized that, wait a minute, we buzz them as flying cars, and we like to talk about them as air taxis. But essentially, it doesn't matter how small or how big this thing is. The minute an and taxi or flying car is built and needs to be tested and compliance and regulated, it follows the same guideline as a Boeing 787. So this huge airplane parked in, Etihad Airlines 787 that flies all the way from Abu Dhabi to Washington, D.C., that follows some very strict federal aviation guidelines. That same compliance requirement is put on these eVTOLs because at the end of the day, yes, we call them flying taxis, flying air taxis and flying cars. They're planes. Okay. These are little planes that look like cars. Okay. And the reality is today, we are getting excited to use them because, logistically, it makes sense to some extent. On the short travel, it makes sense. May bleed out some traffic to certain heat maps and hotspots like airports and bus terminals and all that. Fine, makes sense. But the thing is that we today, if an accident happens, hypothetically speaking, on the road, you can tell the collision because a car, it's another car, but you almost have a trajectory of collision. In the air, you have no clue what will happen. This thing loses control and comes crashing down. It could be a big mess. So I am very excited about what we're trying to do on the autonomous platform. And I love all the innovation that's taking place in Abu Dhabi and Dubai and around UAE, around, and, towards artificial intelligence, machine learning, and what we're trying to do in the area of robotics. The thing is, what we need to realize and pay attention is every technology that we're hoping for it to pick up and suddenly create this kind of breaking point, this paradigm shift in travel, then we need to have the infrastructure in place. And that infrastructure for me is not just, everybody today talks about vertipods, and the vertipods is about, where does this thing land? Where does this take off from? That's fine. I mean, but that's all the testing has been done is around the landing and the taking off. The taking off and landing. For me, when I look at infrastructure, I mean the whole ecosystem. How
Mm,
we are making sure that these air taxis or eVTOLs are flying without disruption, without challenge, without danger, neither to the eVTOL nor the people on the ground, and two, how we're making sure that the whole thing is safe, secure, and well monitored. So for me, this is where I get curious. The other thing I get curious is that today, when you drive on the road and you have these big highways, yeah, you've got the traffic management center, but that's a TMC, it's a traffic control center. It's happening at certain locations within the Department of Transport or Abu Dhabi Mobility. But then when you're going into eVTOLs and air taxis, that's air traffic control. That's not, you're going into ATC, you're going to aviation, you're going into, just like you're controlling an airport, right? So there are a lot of these technologies happening. They're happening quite fast. In some cases, they're working together. In other cases, they can create chaos for one another. And we just got to have a way to make sure that when we are using these technologies, that we're still being able to monitor and manage the safety and security of it all.
that is great. Painting a picture of hailing air taxis and me having flying cars is really something that's really very exciting. I hope it happens during my lifetime. And I love your very crystal clear explanation when it comes to the reality of making sure that there's compliance. There is the consideration of all the sectors that would have to be part of the overall planning and execution to operationalize that, and also making sure that the regulation, compliance, safety, and all the checks that had to happen would really happen. I think my question now would be, because we are in the early stages of it, it's more about that conceptual planning of how that execution would look like in the future. So the critical steps, in my view, would be coming from the operators and the government sectors when it comes to the various bodies who would be involved on it. You've mentioned FAA earlier as well, because in reality, it's very much like touching aviation in general, right? So what would be the foundational steps that governments and operators should already be taking or talking about or discussing at this early stage of the planning phase?
Well, I'm not a pilot. I never flew a plane. Maybe I did on some sort of computer game console, but not in real life. And I don't want to pretend to be a pilot. I'm just going to say that I've spoken to a few people who are pilots, and they're taking this very seriously, and they are following a very, very rigid and serious compliance matrix around testing, certification, and making sure that these eVTOLs, so to speak, meet certain mandates and certain milestones, because they're well aware that, if this thing goes south, it
Mm,
can be problematic and can be very dangerous. So I think right now what's important is to first and foremost see how they work in the first place, whether they actually do, they are able to take off land, have the kind of range that they say they do. And then from there, build, just like they're doing with the autonomous cars. I think at some point they need to build some sort of compliance, testing, and certification matrix that will fit the air taxis and eVTOL technologies.
that is great. And I agree. And I think that's one of the reasons why summits and events like EVIS and EMG is a great ecosystem to talk about all these developments and to connect all the sectors, the people, the government bodies, and customers and the enablers as well who can eventually bring this to life. So with that, I would want to thank you for taking part again in this EVIS and EMG ecosystem that we are building. So, from your perspective, what makes EVIS and EMG the right platform to spotlight and debate and have these conversations about these innovations?
So I actually I learned about EVIS when I got asked to talk at their event on behalf of together with the Abu Dhabi Mobility team, and we are talking about distracted driving and road safety. What has was there? What what struck me and became very curious about is realizing that today, no matter what we're talking about, whether it's an air taxi, an autonomous car, or even a ferry, okay, or even a motorcycle, what we're seeing in the transformations that's happening around the energy space is that we're moving towards electric motors, batteries, and to some extent a hybrid of sorts, right? And a lot of that is basically this whole transformation that's happening towards electric vehicles and electric technology, right? Especially if you look at even all the battery technology that is being built and all the innovation happening there is around how we can get more range and how we can get more performance and all. So for me, EVIS is at the heart of what's happening in mobility altogether. Okay. So again, whether it's an eVTOL or whether it's a autonomous vehicle or whether it's a ferry, it's what are we seeing the make of a vehicle? It's a battery, it's an electric motor. So everything is turning electrical. The other thing is what's happening is because of this sudden shift that's happened, what you've had overnight is a sudden shift also in supply chain. So a long time ago, so before the whole, EV boom and everything was going towards EV, when you were dealing with ICE, which is, the injection car combustion engine, right? But basically like the engines that are working with petrol and all that. Okay. You had a certain supply chain market that revolved around mechanical, electrical, hydraulic, all sorts of parts, right? All that has, if you start seeing more and more maturity and adoption happening in EV, that entire supply chain market around, all the different components of an injection combustion engine, okay, that all is going to slowly disappear because in the end, what you're essentially just dealing with is an electric motor and a battery, and that's it. If anything, you got brakes, you got tires, fine, but the core operation of the car is an electric motor and a battery. So everything is happening, all the innovation is happening around the battery, and all of it is happening around electric motor. And from that, there are all these new companies and startups coming up, and nobody really knows who they are or what they are, right? So it's important that you have summits that bring together first this new supply chain ecosystem to educate the people on what's happening in this EV space. And three, like I said, I come from a background. That's why I'm the chairman of IREF-MENA, and that's what I've always said, is you can't do anything alone, you know?
Mm.
You always need to see where you can complement and work with other people. And in this case, you really do need all the stakeholders coming because everyone plays an important part if we're going to make EV adoption successful and last the way we expect it to.
Love that last piece, Stephen, when you've mentioned about complementing and collaborating across all the stakeholders, because you're right. Even if you're a single entity who has the best vision when it comes to making this happen, it will be impossible because there are like a lot of layers, a lot of sectors, and a lot of shareholders who would really have to hold hands and make all these things possible. So my last question to you would be, what would be the message that you would want to impart for these sectors of innovators, brands, and partners who will also be joining us at EVIS and EMG in 2026?
Well, to everyone who thinks very seriously about being a contributor, a driver, a leader, an innovator, bringing lasting change and performance to the electric vehicle industry in whatever multimodal vehicle form it may be, then you need to come to the summit. You need to be engaged in the summit, in discussions, in interviews, in commentaries, in debates, because you are the ones that will make this future more successful, rewarding, brighter, and allow for the sharing of that deep insight and knowledge and experience which the industry needs as it continues to shift towards this important energy transformation and paradigm.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that, Stephen. Let me end our fun conversation, coming from a very serious and technical conversation with some fun rapid fire questions. So I just would want you to say the first thing that comes to your mind when I ask you these questions. Are you ready?
Here we go, rapid fire. Yes, sure.
Go for it. All right. First question. What is the future mobility in one sentence?
What is the future mobility?
Yep. Or
Night Rider.
what is the future of mobility in one sentence for you?
Night Rider.
Love that. Number two, what is one underrated innovation?
Communication.
Agreed. Number three, what is one overrated buzzword?
AI.
I agree. Last one, what is that one technology that you believe will disrupt cities faster than expected?
Quantum computing.
Interesting. I'll find out more about that. So, Stephen, thank you so very much for your generous time, knowledge, and insights today. I had a great time chatting with you, and I've learned so much from you as well. And I'm sure that all our audience members did. So, your perspectives, your insights, and I'm sure that all the people who have heard this conversation will be very excited to listen and see you live in person at the EVIS and Eco Mobility Global 2020 in October in Abu Dhabi, UAE. So please, if you haven't already, do check out our website at evinnovationsummit.com and ecomobilityglobal.com so you can find out more about the event, the platform, the community, and the engagement that Stephen will also be a huge part of. And for more follow and for more details, do follow us on our social media. We are also very active on LinkedIn, in Instagram, in Facebook, and in all the social platforms for speaker announcements, new podcast episodes, and more updates about the program. Again, this is Joseph Alcantara. Thank you so much for joining us today, and catch us for more episodes in the future to find out more about EVs and EMG. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joseph.
All right.